Now, in this video, we're going to use the loan amount from our last video. So we went through some different kind of trial and error techniques to see what a good loan amount would be for our company based on what we could afford for our quarterly payments with a given interest rate. So we decided on $550,000. So I'm here on the startup sheet, and I'm going to go ahead and enter that. And I'm going to enter it under B26, which is where that long-term business loan would fit in. And once I enter it, it does fill in, a couple other little slots there, and we'll come back to this sheet later. For now, what I want to do in this video is actually look at that loan in a little detail and how it would play out quarter to quarter, excuse me. I keep saying month to month because I know all my payments are monthly, right? But you don't have to make the monthly. This one is quarterly. All right, so I'm going to go to my loan schedule sheet here. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill in some of that basic information to start. So our loan value is going to be $550,000. All right, our rate is still going to be 6%. Actually, what I'm going to do instead here, this way it'll allow it to be a little bit more fluid, is I'm going to actually use my cell reference from the other page. So if I decide to change my loan amount later over there, it will update here as well. So I'm going to go back for a second to my startup sheet. I'm going to select cell B26, excuse me, and go back to my sheet. And it's the same value, but that way, if I make changes later on, I don't have to change it on multiple sheets. I can just change it in one or two places. So we're still going to use the $550,000. Our rate is still going to be 6%. We're doing quarterly, so we're still going to do 4 payments per year. My rate per period is still going to be the 6% divided by 4. And let's see, we're still going to do 5 years. And our number of payments, we said, was going to be 4 times 5 for 20 total payments. And then now what we can do is we can actually officially calculate our payment. We had plugged in $32,000 before, but if you remember, the loan amount was like $549,000. So we're rounding here. So let's figure out what our exact payment would be. So I'm going to hit PMT. We'll click that. Let's see, my rate is 1.5%. I have 20 total payments. My present value is $550,000. And again, I'm going to skip entering the final our future value here, excuse me, because it's going to be 0 and that's the default, as is the type is also defaulted to 0 with an end of period payment. So we see that our payment is exactly $32,035. So it's slightly over that $32,000 because we did round the loan up a little bit in the previous worksheet. Now, what I want to look at here is I want to break down each payment. Now, when you make a payment like this, and it's the same thing in your own personal life, if you make a payment on any sort of loan or on a credit card or something like that, some of the money that you spend goes towards interest, which are fees that accumulate for borrowing that money, and some of it goes towards your principal, which is actually paying down the loan amount, and it's split. If you make a standard monthly payment, what happens is in the beginning of your payment, your repayment period, most of your payment is going towards interest. Whereas at the end of your repayment period, most of it is going towards principal. So it sort of does a swap along the way, but every single month, some of your money is going towards interest and some of that money is going towards the principal. The interest is paying the fee basically, and the amount that goes to principal is the amount that's actually reducing your loan amount. So the breakdown of how that all works is called your amortization schedule. And that's what we're looking at here. So you can see that they have it sort of preset up by year. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, if you scroll down 5 years. And they also have it by period, right? Because each year we're making 4 payments. So that's why they have it 4 payments for each one. And they're just counting down the line, which is common. Right, this is your first payment, your second payment, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, etc. So you're going to have 20 payments by the end once you've paid off this loan amount. Now, there are a lot of online calculators that can do amortization schedules for you. I'm not going to lie. Whenever I do this in my own personal life, I usually will just rely on one of those to be a little bit faster. But if I was doing working for a company, I wouldn't do that. I'd probably come here and actually do all the work in Excel myself and have that documentation. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do this in Excel, and we'll run through this step by step there. All right, so let's see. We have everything set up. All right, so in cell C9, so I'm going to start with my first period here. So this is like making our first payment ever on this loan. My beginning formula here is 550,000. So at the very first payment, right, or right before you make that very first payment, right, your loan amount is $5,000. So we haven't made any payments yet, and we're doing the calculation for what happens for the first payment. Now, I'd like to know what part of my payment is going to go towards interest, what part's going to go towards principal. And we have some formulas in Excel that can do this very quickly for us. So we don't have to do it by hand or really worry about that. Although you actually can do this by hand. The formulas are not that bad. They're pretty easy to use. It's basically sort of just applying the simple interest formula, that PRT formula, if you're familiar with it, over and over again. So IPMT stands for the interest portion of the payment. And then here I am going to enter the rate to start. Now, I do want to copy this down eventually, so I'm going to fix some of my cells and use that $sign. All right, so let's go ahead. My first one is going to be D5. So I'm going to use my rate per period. My next cell is going to be B9. So this PER stands for the period that we're in. So we're in the first period. I'm not going to fix that because I do want that to change as I copy it down. My NPER, so my number of total payments, is not going to change. So I'm going to cell here. So F5. When they say present value, they mean the starting loan amount in this case. So my starting loan amount is this $550,000. And again, that's not going to change, right? My starting loan amount is the same. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that cell as well. I'm going to leave off future value here because my goal is to get it to 0. And same thing for the type. It's automatically inputs the 0. And then I hit enter. Now we have a similar formula for our principal. So how much of the payment goes towards your principal? And we're going to hit PPMT. So principal payment. And again, I'm going to fix the rate here. I'm still in period 1. I'm going to fix my total number of payments. And I'm going to fix my present value of 550,000. And then I can add these two cells together to get the total payment that I'm making. So notice that my total payment is 32,000. It matches this right here, 32,035. And then what's happening is for that first $32 payment that I'm making, about $8,000 is going towards interest, and about $24,000 almost is going towards the loan. So that's what happens for the first payment. Now for the second payment, we're going to kind of start it and then we're going to copy the rest down. So what happens for C10 is that you're making this principal payment of about $24,000. So your loan amount is not $550,000 anymore. It's $550,000 minus the $24,000 that has gone towards the principal. Now, to get that amount here, you're going to take your cell before, and you're going to add it to your principal payment. Now, you may be saying, Professor Paul, you just said that we would subtract that, right? That amount comes out, and it does. The reason we have an addition symbol here is because this payment is negative, right? See how it's in the parentheses? It's a negative. So that's why we can just write the plus sign, because you're adding a positive and a negative, which subtraction. So it does work out. So at the end of the first payment, our loan amount is only $526,215. And then we can go ahead and just kind of drag and drop that formula down. And it should fill in appropriately. So again, you can see here that we did fix some of the cells, and it is dropping down to B10, so row 10. You just get my Zoom stuff out of the way here, etc. So that is looking good for our second payment. And now what we can do is we should be able to copy this whole thing down. So I'm just going to select it and copy down. And you can see as you go through, the payment amount stays the same, but the amount going towards interest in the first column becomes smaller. The amount going towards principal in the second column becomes bigger. And that's what happens for loan payments like this. As you go through the loan, your interest amount gets less and your amount going towards the loan gets more, that amount towards the principal. And you can also do fill without formatting so that we don't change any formats that we had at the beginning. Now the final balance, you can just continue this one column down one more slot, and you should see a final balance of 0 there, which we do. I don't like that dash. You can change it over. I didn't mean to highlight both cells, but I just highlighted the cell and made it currency instead. And you can see your final balance is 0, which is what we want, right? We want to pay off that entire loan in the 20 payment periods there. All right, so the last thing I want to do in this video is just look at some cumulative. Now, if we have an amortization table, then obviously we could also use a sum function and just kind of add up the total we've spent in interest or the total we've spent for our principal, for instance, which should be the loan amount. But we could add up the interest and just see how much we've spent along the way. But we may not always have the amortization table, or we may want to look at specific parts of our payment schedule. So what we have down here is just some different questions on, we'd like to focus on what happens for year 1, year 2, 3, 4, and 5, and look at the total interest we've spent in year 1, the total interest we've paid towards the principal in year 1, and then how much of the loan we still owe. So instead of going through the whole totals or doing this more manually, we can use formulas so that we can avoid the sum function and trying to kind of partition it ourselves. However, the sum function would still work here. But let me show you these two new functions. The first one is to find the cumulative interest that you've paid. Cumulative means when you put it all together. So for cumulative interest, we're looking for year 1. So we're doing from quarters 1 to 4. So the entire year 1, I love to know how much interest did I pay and how much did I pay towards principal. All right, so I'm going to hit equals, and the formula for the cumulative interest is CUM for cumulative, and then you can see I is right there. So cumulative payment, the I is for interest. Now I do have to do some scrolling up, but I want you to note that I'm using the same cells that I have been already. So what I'm going to put here for my rate is, again, I'm going to fix cell D5, which is that 1.5%. My NPR should be that 20, right? I'm going to fix that as well. The reason I'm fixing them is I'm going to copy them, and I don't want those cells to change. I want them to stay they are. And then the next part asks you for the start and ending type or ending period. So we're going to start with period 1 and we're going to end with period 4. So we're selecting those two things. And then we can go ahead and put a 0 in for type there. Here it's the same example for type, but it's not optional. You do have to type it in. So you would go ahead and put 0 for payments that are made at the end of the period, which is what we're doing. Oh, hang on, let me see. What did I miss? Let's see, D5, F5. Oh, I missed one. See, even me. I missed the present value right before my start period. So let's go ahead and fix that. Our present value was that 500,000. Which was up in cell A5. All right, so let's double check. I have my rate, I have my number of payments, I have my present value, I now have my start, my end, and then my type 0 end. So for the first year, we spent about $31,000 in interest on those payments. I can also find the cumulative principal. So I type in CUM for cumulative, and you can see prints right here. So cumulative principal. And it's going to be almost the same exact formula. So my rate is that 1.5%, which is up there in cell D5. I'm doing 20 payments, which is up there in cell F5. My original present value, so my original loan amount, is cell A5. I'm starting in period 1. I'm going to period 4, and then I'm going to use 0 as my default type. So for the first year, I spent our company spent $97,000 towards that principal. And then again, you can just copy these to the right and just check them, make sure they're changing. So all my other cells are fixed, but it is moving to C34 and C35, here D34 and D35, and so on. So again, I did fix some of those cells because I didn't want them to move, but I do want the periods to move. For your total at the end here, you could just use a regular sum function and total them up. Or if you wanted to, you could go back to your home screen here over to edit, use those sum functions. So let me just auto sum those right there. But again, a regular sum function would be fine there, just adding up, going across. So the total interest we have spent was $90,000 in interest over. And then your principal should be that loan amount, that $550,000. All right, the last thing we want to go ahead and add in here is row 38. So for B38, I'm going to enter and fix my A5 cell. Yeah, my A5 cell, that looks good. And then I'm going to go ahead and add it with my B37 cell. And again, I'm adding because it's already negative, so it's going to get subtracted out. So I'm starting with the 550,000, and I'm basically subtracting out the principal we've already paid. So I hit enter there. For my next cell, what here is I'm not starting with the 550,000 though. I'm starting with this 452,000, and then again, I want to incorporate that we've spent $103,000 towards the principal. So I hit enter there. And again, now at this point, you should be able to copy these over. And again, you can check to make sure they are transferring correctly along the way. And your final value should be 0 because at the end of year 5, you should have paid off that entire loan. So here's just a couple different analyses that you can do that really break down that monthly payment in much more detail. And see how much you really are spending. So your $550,000 loan is over $90,000 in interest. So it's definitely something to consider, right? When you take out loans or you use credit cards and things like that, that the interest really does add up, particularly for very large loan amounts and for long-term loans as well. They do up very quickly. So you want to make sure that you really think about how much you need and take out exactly that. And probably not a lot extra, right? Unless you think you would need it, right? But it's not a great idea to take out extra money if you don't need it. So here, using video 1, we really focus on, okay, well, how much can we actually afford? And it was just the 550,000. We couldn't do the 650, right? So there is some give and take when looking at finances as well.